And Whitaker was born 1548 to a relatively notable ecclesiastical family in England. His uncle was Alexander Knoll, who, in addition to being the dean of St. Paul's Cathedral, was also the author of several very notable catechisms that were used in the Church of England for several centuries and actually have gained a bit of a traction and resurgence here in recent years in various Anglican circles. He was noted from a young age as a pretty prolific intellect. He had a wide grasp of source material, great grasp with languages. I think when he was an undergraduate at Cambridge, he translated the entire Book of Common Prayer into Greek just for fun. And he was known for just being very, very sharp. He gets appointed Regius Professor of Oxford at just the age of 32, very young. He was given lectureships and appointments over several of his more senior colleagues, which could cause a bit of friction in places. And always one to go for the highest possible achievement. He decided to, in the late 15 or mid to late 1580s, he decided to write two orations against two notable Roman theologians of the time. The first and the lesser known of the two was Thomas Stapleton, who was an English Roman priest living in exile, largely a polemicist, wrote a lot of works against the English Protestants. And the second, and by far the most notable of the two, was an Italian named Roberto Bellarmino, or Robert Bellarmine as we know him today. Bellarmine was, bar none in Rome, the best of the papal apologists. He was, largely because he was unconcerned with Vatican politics. Like he was kind of allergic to it. So he didn't get caught up in all that and just spent so much of his time in defending the Council of Trent and defending papal prerogatives. He was called by Pope, or described by Pope Clement VIII, I believe, who appointed him to several high-ranking positions, that he said the Church of God has no equal in Bellarmine's learning. And that wasn't like hyperbole. He was being very serious about Bellarmine's intellect. And yet in Whitaker, he met someone who was as equally ambitious in his theological in his desires to persuade the other side, but also someone who, as Dr. Truman, I think, well described it in his foreword, he said more than met his match in this young Englishman. We know that because Bellarmine actually hung a portrait, or he is said to have hung a portrait of Whitaker in his private study as an homage to Whitaker, because Whitaker did not just write the Disputation on Holy Scripture against Bellarmine. He wrote at least 5 volumes against Bellarmine, responding to Bellarmine's own works. And the reason I say at least 5 is because there are several that are in manuscript only form, which were never finished or exist only in archives. So he was likely preparing even more than just the ones that he wrote against those particular works of Bellarmine. Whitaker, tragically, the Disputation is the first of these, written 1588, from which the rest follow. And it's by far the most famous, in part because it really was such a systematic treatment of the subject on everything from the theology to church history to textual manuscript studies, that it remained in the Protestant consciousness for down to today. But you find actually across Protestant traditions in the 16th and 17th centuries, scholars drawing on this. There was actually a great paper written by a Lutheran scholar about how Johann Gerhard actually drew most of his source material and the structure and lines of argument on the perspicuity of Scripture that he writes in his dogmatics, that he draws it actually straight from Whitaker's Disputation. So that's the kind of influence that he held amongst his contemporaries, but also subsequent generations of writers too.